Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Orientation Live at Virginia Tech. We are so happy you are going to be joining us this fall. My name is Dr. Kim Filer. I am the Associate Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning at Virginia Tech. And I am here to welcome you to what we call Preparing for the College Classroom, or we also call it the Mock Lecture Series. So as you come to Virginia Tech, we know many of you are nervous about the learning environment and being successful at Virginia Tech. We know you're excellent students, and what happens when you come to college is you start thinking about, well, there's some learning environments that I'm not so familiar with. Some large courses, coming in with other very talented students, what's that going to feel like? How can I really get help? And so this session is going to give you a little bit of experience with a first-year college professor who teaches students all the time and is well recognized. So today what you're going to do is you're going to hear from one of our excellent first-year professors, Dr. Buddy Howell. And Dr. Howell's coming to us as a native Texan. This is going to be his 12th year at Virginia Tech. And he teaches in the communication department in our College of Liberal Arts and Human Studies. And he is known as an excellent, amazing first-year teacher. And he was recognized this year by students through the Sporn Award from the Academy of Teaching Excellence. And he's known both for his mentorship and the relationships he builds with students, both in his large classrooms as well as the smaller courses he teaches. So today, I welcome Dr. Buddy Howell. And also I want you, as you're listening to the lecture and you're listening to Dr. Howell give you some advice on how to be really a strong student your very first year, to think about what kind of questions you have for him, both from the academic content as well as the advice he's going to offer you about being a student. So across the bottom of your screen, you're going to see the ability to text in some questions, and there'll be a code. So we hope that as you're listening to the lecture and you're learning from Dr. Howell, you'll be thinking about questions you have for him, because the last 10 minutes, he's going to be taking your questions and answering them. So here's Dr. Howell, and I hope you enjoy your lecture.
Thank you, Kim. Howdy, Hokies. Welcome to Virginia Tech. As Kim said, my name is Dr. Buddy Howell, and I've learned through the years that as I introduce myself to people, I often get an interesting response. They'll ask me, "Is Buddy your real name?" To which I have learned to respond, "Is that not a good name for a real name? Should I be angry at my parents?" No, but my real name is Buddy, so if you see me on campus, holler across the drill field, "Howdy, Buddy," and I'll know that you are one of our first-year Hokies. So let me begin by saying congratulations. You have made one of the most important decisions of your life, where you will go to school. But not just becoming a Hokie, you made the very important decision to avoid that community college up the road in Charlottesville. And I know, let's give community colleges their due. I went to a community college for 2 years before I transferred to my 4-year university. And comparing that school in Charlottesville to a community college is really an insult to community colleges. So I stand corrected. But congratulations. And the first rule you need to remember about being a Hokie is that we never refer to that school in Charlottesville as UVA. They must forever be known by Hokies as Virginia University, because as Hokies we know that institution is not the University of Virginia. So I welcome you as Hokies, and I'm thankful for this privilege to get to share with you what is a truncated lecture. It's an actual lecture that I do in a couple of classes with some modifications. It'll be a little shorter than my typical lecture. But along the way, I'm going to give you some success strategy tips, things that are tried and true. They've been proven to work, and they will help you be successful in college. Hopefully that reduces some of your anxiety, uncertainty reduction. What do I need to do to be successful in college? You were good students in high school, but as we say, now you're in college, so welcome to the NFL. What does the essence of the universe have to do with human communication? On first glance, you might say, I have no idea, nothing. Well, If you were here, and if you were in my Introduction to Communication course or my Rhetorical Tradition course, you would already have online or in your hand something that looks like this. The course syllabus. Now, I think y'all have these in classes in high school, so you should be used to syllabi. But it's important that you read it. It's one of the most common mistakes college students make, is that they do not read the syllabus. If they do not pay attention to what is due in any particular class. So you will see on the course schedule something that looks like this: a date, a topic, and a reading assignment, or some sort of homework assignment. And typically, at least in my case, and probably for most professors, if there is something listed as an assignment, it's something we want you to do before you come to class that day. So, if it were Wednesday, August 26th, the topic for that class would be, what does the essence of the universe have to do with human communication? I would have wanted you to read the excerpt from Homer's Iliad, and you would have found that on the Canvas site. So the first thing you can do to succeed is go to class prepared. And if this were a real class and you read the excerpt from Homer's Iliad, you would have some idea of what it is we're going to be talking about in class today. And that's important. It's very important that you prepare before going to class. Why? Well, let me ask you a really difficult question. What is that thing you see in the corner of the screen? It's a bucket, or as the British might say, it's a pail. Let me give you a word of advice. Don't bring a bucket to class, right? What do you have up here? Is it a bucket? No, it's a brain. So don't bring the bucket to class. Bring your brain to class, prepared to engage. Why? As William Butler Yeats said, education is not the filling of a pail. Don't come to class and expect that the professor is just going to pour a bunch of stuff in. You're going to try to memorize it all and come back on the day of the exam and you're going to shake it all out on the Scantron and hope it lands in the right place. That's not education. And your future employers, potential employers, aren't going to care how much you can memorize. They're going to care how much you've learned and how well you can think. So education is not the filling of a pail. It's the lighting of a fire. And that comes from interaction, right? You can't get a match to light unless you strike it against something. When you prepare before you come to class, you're ready to interact and you're ready to engage with the topic, to engage with the material, to engage with the professor. And there's nothing that we love more in academia than students who engage. Students who come prepared, who have questions, who offer their ideas. So don't be shy about asking questions, or if professors ask for examples to apply something, give an example. Better it be a bad example and we find that out while we're in class than you didn't learn the concept or the term and we find that out on the exam. So come to class prepared. Education is not the filling of a pail but the lighting of a fire. So hopefully what I'm going to do in the time that we have left is tell you about two essence guys, light some fires, and get you to learn about two Greek pre-Socratic philosophers who influence still to this day the way we think about human communication. And they did it by asking questions about the essence of the universe. So one of these essence guys was named Heraclitus. If you're watching with your mom or your dad, turn and look at them and say, thanks for not naming me Heraclitus. Other guy is Parmenides. Again, these are two pre-Socratic philosophers. So they were philosophizing prior to Socrates' life. And they were interested in the cosmos. Is there a common essence? All this in which we live and all of us that live in it. Is there anything that we have in common? And you say, what in the world does that have to do with communication? Well, if you're asking that question, that means you're paying attention, and that's what we're going to discover. So let's talk about Heraclitus first. Now, I typically give students dates for people and time frames for concepts. And one of the things you want to ask a professor, if you see something on a PowerPoint slide, you need to ask the professor, is that something that you need to learn? I always try to tell students, you don't have to worry about learning or memorizing dates. I just give them to you to set the context, and so that once you've learned about Heraclitus, you have an idea of how long the impact his ideas have been making on the world. Heraclitus was known as the Riddler because he often spoke and wrote in riddles. And his view of the essence of the universe was that it was in a state of constant change. In fact, he said all things flow, nothing abides. All things flow. Hence, they're always changing. Nothing remains, nothing abides. In fact, he said no one can step in the same river twice. Now, stop and think about that for a minute. If you were in my class, to this point, you might be collecting, right? You're taking notes, writing or typing. But when I pause, you should pause. Because class time is not just for collecting information. It's for processing. Remember, education is not the filling of a pail. It's the lighting of a fire. So we stop and think about this for a moment. One does not step in the same river twice. What does that mean? What impact does that have on the way we communicate? Well, when you get to Blacksburg, if we were to go down to the New River Junction and get some tubes and go tubing, we'd get the tubes, pay for those, rent them, walk down to the river, we'd step in, we would probably say, "Woo, that's cold." We'd step back out, but we say we didn't come all this way to sit on the bank. So we try to get back in, maybe slowly, because the water's cold. But the question I ask you is, Heraclitus said you can't step in that same river twice. If we step in the new river and it's cold and we step back out, then step back in, he says it's no longer the new river. What do you say? You say, something wrong, Heraclitus needs a checkup from the neck up. Of course, it's the same river. It's the new river. It didn't become the old river. It didn't become the mighty Mississippi. It didn't become the Colorado River. Would you say there's something wrong with that? That can't be true? It is still the same river? Or would you say it is a new river because all things flow? The water has moved. If we upset the sediment on the bottom of the river, that has now changed. Well, let's think of it in a different way. Are you the same person that you were 5 years ago? Now, if you were here in the classroom with me, I'd ask you for a show of hands. And then I would do that one thing that most students hate. They'd rather be thrown out of a plane at 30,000 feet without a parachute than have a professor call on them in class. But get used to it, because education is not the filling of a pail, it's the lighting of a fire. So I'd call on you and say, what do you think? Are you the same person you were 5 years ago? Now, sometimes students will say, absolutely not. I've changed, to which I respond by asking them, have you told your parents? Because they might look at you and say, who are you? And what have you done with my son or daughter? I do that all the time with my teenagers. I have twins. Who are you and what have you done with my kids? Kids, fun to make them, but hard to raise them, right? It's a challenge, but y'all are a blessing. So if you're not the same person you were 5 years ago, what happened to that person? Do you not still have that same DNA with which you were born, that eye color? Are you not still whoever it was that your parents named? How can you not be that same person? And yet, depending upon perspective, right? Depending upon how we use language, we might say, I can both be the same person I was 5 years ago and yet have changed, right? I mean, the world seems to be constantly changing. You take a shower and dry off and there go dead skin cells. There goes hair, right? Your mood changes, your blood sugar level changes, your attitudes change. Heraclitus seems to be onto something there. All things flow, nothing abides. But what does that have to do with human communication? Well, something about perspective, and we gain perspective through our use of language. But let's check out his counterpart, Parmenides. What was his view? Well, let me make one pedagogical, big academic word, pedagogical note here. These are two perspectives, and hopefully you're asking yourself the question, how am I going to remember these guys, these two essence guys and their views, and keep them apart? Now, this is why it's important to be paying attention in class and not texting or on your phone or checking out March Madness, seeing what the brackets are, which bowl games are going to have teams competing. Because you're going to hear a professor say something like this, Parmenides, His name begins with a P. Why is that important? Because that will help me remember that his view of the universe is that it is permanent. He didn't believe that all things were changing. He believed that all is one. And if I can remember that P, Parmenides, his view of the essence of the universe was permanence, I can remember that Heraclitus was just the opposite. It was always changing. So permanence, Parmenides says, is the essence of the universe. Change is just an illusion. Our senses, he said, deceive us. And we might respond by saying, but look, P, winter, spring, summer, fall, dew point, humidity, temperature, it's always changing. What would Parmenides say? Winter, spring, summer, fall, it never changes. There is an illusion that there is change, but there is always winter, spring, summer, fall. There is always a temperature, right? So we might say the only thing that remains the same is that everything is always changing. What? How can they both be right? How can they have separate views and yet both be right? Well, we're not going to try to defy the law of logic, the law of non-contradiction. Can't be both true, but in terms of their perspectives, they can give us ways of looking at the universe, which then gives us ways of thinking about human communication. So, in summary, let's see what this can do to help us answer the question, what does the essence of the universe have to do with human communication? In the Heraclitean tradition, that is, that way of thinking in the Western world influenced by Heraclitus, life is ever changing. In the Parmenidean tradition, the essence, not the appearance, but the essence of the universe is permanence. Well, there are implications for ideas. Words mean things, and ideas have consequences. If life is ever changing, that means all situations are different. Every situation in life is different. But if the essence of the universe, not the appearance, but the essence, is permanence, that means that there are some elements of life that are the same. We might say they're eternal, or they're universal, or they're absolute. One of those things in the natural world would be, can you think of it? Something in the natural world that we are all bound by, and we say it's universal. No matter where you go on the planet, it's there, it's true. No matter who you are, what is that thing? I hope somebody said gravity. That's right. It's absolute. It's immutable. It doesn't change. Well, if all situations are different, that means what is true in one moment is not going to be true in another. So truth then is relative. It's relative to the situation. It's related to the circumstances. Unless you take the Parmenidean view that says truth is absolute. It is immutable, or there are some things that are immutable. That is, they don't mutate. They're not dependent upon the circumstances or the situation. They're not relative to whatever is going on in the moment. So, we've been collecting again. Now stop and breathe and process. What are the implications for those ideas? Truth is relative or situational. Truth is absolute. Can you think of a question, a situation, might help us illustrate those? Here's a question I usually pose to students. Is it wrong to lie? Now, if you say, it depends, then you're thinking in the Heraclitean tradition. Because you're saying right or wrong is determined by the circumstance or the situation. Now, you might say, sometimes it's wrong, or yeah, it's really wrong, but there are times when we sort of can fudge, right? Do you like my new haircut? And you don't want to hurt your friend's feelings, so you say, oh, that's different, right? We're trying to get around, find ways to navigate. Well, but then other people might say, in the Parmenidean view, right, it is always wrong to distort reality, to distort the truth. You wouldn't want somebody lying to you. You wouldn't want somebody saying they're your friend and it turns out that they're not. So we have this quandary. Now, you see how then these ideas about the essence of the universe have implications for our worldview, the way we view the world. And the way we view the world, wait for it, here's one of the answers to the question, what does the essence of the universe have to do with human communication? The way we view the world becomes the way we communicate in it. You see, if you think it's okay to lie, you will do what? Sometimes lie. If you say it's not, my worldview tells me truth is absolute and it shouldn't be distorted, if that's your view, that becomes the way you communicate in the world. You won't lie. What is your worldview? Have you thought about that? Hopefully you haven't just gone through high school trying to make grades, right? Because when you get to college, let me tell you something. That GPA in high school might have helped you get in, but I know from talking to potential employers, Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning had a panel that came, maybe that was career and professional development. But anyway, there were employers, potential employers that came, and we asked them, what are you looking for in a college grad? Does GPA matter? And they said GPA matters, but if a college student doesn't have a 4.0, that doesn't mean we won't grant them an interview. So your GPA is important, but only as it is a reflection of what you've learned. And if you haven't learned anything and all you've done is memorize, you have a photographic memory and you can memorize well enough to do well on exams and have a good GPA, they'll find out very quickly in the interview that it's just a number. So think about learning. What is my worldview? What do I believe about the essence of the universe? What do I believe about truth? Is it small t relative? Is it capital T absolute? And one way of thinking about that is ask yourself this question. Do I believe that there are absolute truths? Or make it even more specific. Are there absolute truths in the universe? We know there's one in gravity, right? That's the natural world. But what about moral truths? Are there absolute truths? Many times people say, I don't believe there are any absolute truths, particularly when it comes to morality. Now think about that for a moment. Are you absolutely sure that there are no absolute truths? Because if you're absolutely sure, that is to say, if it is absolutely true that there are no absolute truths, you just discovered an absolute truth. And if there's one, that means we ought to search for others. You see, the way we view the world becomes the way we communicate in it. Well, in the Heraclitean tradition, then communication is primary. Why is it primary? It creates or reveals what is true, or what we think is right. How does a jury decide to vote guilty or not guilty? Unless there is indisputable, unequivocal evidence that the accused committed the crime, what are we left with? Deliberation. Have you ever made a decision that you were almost absolutely sure was the right decision and it turned out not to be a good decision? So we go back in life and we say, how do we make good decisions? Deliberation. Getting advice. Medicine, they say, get a second opinion, right? And so we deliberate and we think critically and we think thoughts about our thoughts and we get advice and we arrive at what we think is probably right or the best answer. In that view, then, communication is primary, and that's why we study. It's the basis for our law. It's the basis for politics. Heck, if you even turn on a sports show on TV or the radio, they may be arguing about what is the best team in the NBA or MLB or WNBA, NFL. What are they doing? They're communicating, and they're trying to arrive at or support arguments for what they think is the right way to view a team or a player. It goes on all around us. Does that mean to say that communication is always primary? There's one view that says it's not. It's secondary. It is the Parmenidean view, and we see that view primarily in the world's major religions. in Greek philosophy. Truth is primary, because if you don't have truth, it doesn't matter how eloquently you can communicate, right? In the Greek philosophical tradition, reason, training your mind to search and ask questions, the Socratic method, right? Arriving at truth, then communication becomes important because you're going to communicate that truth that you've reasoned your way to others. Or instead of reasoning up in the Western tradition, Judaism and Christianity, and more the influence of Islam, is the idea that absolute truth is revealed, right? It is revealed down to us. Moses goes on Mount Sinai and God gives him the Ten Commandments. Jesus, the Word, becomes flesh, comes down, and he is the truth. So reasoning our way up, truth being revealed down, but truth is primary. Then, once we know capital R reality, capital T truth, communication becomes important to convey that truth to the world. So again, no matter how you look at it, communication is important. It may be viewed as being primary, it may be viewed as being secondary, but your view of the importance of communication depends upon your worldview, how you see the world. What does the essence of the universe have to do with human communication? The way you view the universe will determine the way you communicate in it. So success strategy number 2, take and share good notes. As you're thinking through these questions in the classroom, you know that you're going to be able to make much more sense out of them if you've gone in there prepared. So read and prepare before you go to class. And this should go without being said, but you got to go to class, right? Go to class. Don't skip. Don't be that student. I get an email and it says, "Hey, Prof, you cover anything important in class today?" "No," I write back. "I am a communication professor and I usually just go to class and stand there because I like to hear myself talk." Of course you missed something important in class today. So one of the best things you can do is buy a second alarm clock, or have an agreement with your roommate, right? Set alarms, multiple, on your phone. Do everything you can to make sure that you go to class. But don't be that student who walks up to the professor at the beginning of class and says, "I have the flu, is it okay if I stay home?" Right? Happens far too often. Stay home. Trust me, we will be glad you did. Send an email. If you missed, though, contact the professor. But hopefully, when you are in class, and your friend that you've made, study buddy that you have met and made this agreement with, hopefully they will be listening actively, taking good notes, right? Writing down examples, perhaps thinking of their own examples. Whether they're typing or they're writing, try to take good notes. But again, don't be so focused on collecting that you're not processing. But if you have good notes and you have someone that you can rely on and they can rely on you, a Hokie study buddy, Hokies helping Hokies, right? You don't have to worry about being able to get the notes if you are sick. Well, think about this for a minute. Do I type to take notes or do I write by hand? Some of you type faster than you write. Some of you are used to writing, taking notes by hand, slow typer like me. Find what works for you, but know this. If you have difficulty with the temptation of a laptop to go look at other things in between notes, swiping over, F2, F3, F4 or something, you open and close these screens, right? If that's a temptation, take notes by hand. Studies show, not sure exactly why yet, but studies show that students who take notes by hand tend to remember more. And I think that may be because they can't write everything down, and so they're having to process it before they write it. It's different than just standing there and being the court reporter, right, or sitting there being the court reporter and trying to write everything on the PowerPoint slide and everything the professor says. But find what works for you. I have had students in a large lecture class who sat in the back, didn't do well on the first exam because they were looking at things on their computer, texting on their phone, right, taking notes by hand, but not having good notes. They closed their laptops, moved down to the front of the class, began taking notes by hand. And the two that I remember offhand, one ended up making an A- in the class, and one ended up with a B+, and that was after a D and an F on the first exam. So it makes a difference where you sit and how you take notes. Find what works for you that helps you succeed. Again, get to know somebody in the class. Don't be like me. I was shy. I would go in and pick the last row in the corner and the last seat. Didn't get to know people, and when it came time to study for the exam, I was on this lonely island. And I realized I think I missed something in the notes, and then I wasn't as prepared as I needed to be for the exam. So get to know your Hokies. Introduce yourself. Ask the professor, hey, are you going to put a list of people who'd be willing to study together? I do that so students can contact other students. We would never post your information without your permission, but we would do that. If you want to get to know someone else in the class, particularly in the age of COVID where we're online, ask the professor. We really are here because we want to see you succeed, not because we want to see you fail. Get to know people in your class, and remember Carl. Begin now to learn Carl. What is Carl? Go to class and collect the information that you need. But don't just collect, right? Process. Apply it to your life. Think of examples where you can apply it. Take this new stuff you're learning and graft it in with stuff you already know with life experience. Then you're not just memorizing. You're really learning. And then reflect on that. Talk about it with someone else in the class. Raise your hand and ask a question in class. Or make time to go to a professor's office hours and discuss it with the professor. Or if we have Zoom office hours, as it looks like we will, make time to meet with the professor when they're available to you, because collecting, applying, and reflecting is what will help you learn. Commit yourself now to learning, not just to earning a grade. Because again, your future employer doesn't care how well you memorize. And if you didn't learn, they're not going to care about your grades. Learn to think, not memorize, and you will succeed. Teaching, is it a monologue or a dialogue? As we move to wrap up, this is so important to think about this. There are going to be times when teaching is a monologue, particularly if we're on Zoom. The teacher has information he or she needs to give to you. That's the monologue, when I'm talking and giving information. But don't miss out for the opportunities when it's a dialogue. If I ask somebody, ask the class, can somebody give me an example? Can you apply this? Don't be shy. Raise your hand. Unmute that button on Zoom. Make a comment, right? Don't come to class with the bucket. Bring your brain, because you have perspectives that other people don't have. And there may be something that you share that lights that fire, and they say, oh, Dr. Howell's example didn't work. But when that student said that, oh, now I see what he's saying. Teaching is not just a monologue. It is a dialogue. Herbert Simon put it this way. When you think about education and learning, learning results from what the student does and thinks, and only from what the student does and thinks. The teacher can advance learning only by influencing what the student does to learn. So you can never again say, I didn't learn a thing in that class. Because if you say that, is that a criticism of the teacher or the professor? Or is that a criticism of yourself for not learning? Don't let any professor, any teacher, any instructor, anyone in life keep you from learning. Find what works for you and learn. And remember that it is a dialogue. It is a lighting of a fire. Benjamin Franklin said, if you tell me, I'll forget. Teach me, and I may remember. Involve me, and I learn. Good professors don't just know the content, they know their students. And the way we get to know our students is by interacting with you, by involving you in learning. So don't withdraw from that involvement and that engagement. I wrap up with this. I'll leave you with one thought, a Latin phrase in just a moment. But again, the syllabus is important for these reasons. Contact information. If you're on campus and your professor's holding office hours, You need to know where the office is, what the phone number is, what the email is, and the hours that they have those office hours. Or, as many of us will be doing, we'll be on Zoom at a certain time. If you know that I'm going to be on Zoom Monday from 3 to 4, I've given you the information to contact me and get in that Zoom room. Come and ask questions. And they don't always have to be questions about the class. Faculty are human, and we do love our students, and we like to get to know our students, and office hours are a way to do that. If you have a teaching assistant in the class, particularly large lecture classes often have teaching assistants, look on the syllabus for their information. Find out when they are available, and notice that it says by appointment. Typically, faculty don't mean that you have to make an appointment to visit during office hours. We mean if you can't be available when I am in my office hours, we'll make an appointment, and we will get together whenever we're both available. So don't be shy about going to see or spending time on Zoom with your faculty. Again, we love our Hokies, and we're here not to see you fail, but to help you succeed. So we'll wrap up before we have time for your questions with something called Tullys Rule. And before I tell you what Tullys Rule is, let me tell you how it influenced two famous people in the Renaissance, William Cowper and the artist Raphael. If you don't know about Raphael's paintings, go check those out. He's considered one of the masters with the other Machiavelli and Da Vinci in the Renaissance, but also William Cowper and poetry during the Renaissance. They followed Tullys Rule, and it will help you as a Hokie in college. What is Tullys Rule? Tullys Rule is nulla dies sine linea. It's a Latin phrase that means no day without a line. Tully was Marcus Tullius Cicero. He was a Roman who worked his way up, we might say the Cinderella story in America. Became educated as a lawyer, got into the Roman Senate. Because of his oratory and his understanding of politics, his eloquence as a lawyer, he worked his way up to the highest position in the land, what we would call a co-presidency in America. Marcus Tullius Cicero. No day without a line. What did that mean? No day without learning. No day without some work. Raphael said, no day without a stroke. Some stroke of the brush. To continue to develop those skills that I have. So even and I encourage you to give yourself a sabbatical, a Sabbath, right? Take a day and rest and recharge your battery. But even on that day, have some learning that you do for pleasure. Have some reading that you do for pleasure. And if you do that, no day without a line, no day without learning, no day without a stroke of the brush, you're going to find that not only is it much more likely you'll succeed in college, but you're going to learn a lot about life. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, and it seems that we have a question. Is it possible to have the concept of both Heraclitean tradition and is it the Parmenidean tradition, right? To have both? Is that the question? To hold both? There is some sense of that tension. That is a great question. Think about our legal system. In a sense, we hold to the Parmenidean view when we say it's wrong to murder. I think human beings around the globe would agree. It is wrong. Would we say that's a universal or absolute or immutable truth? It's wrong to murder. But when a human being does something that causes the death of another human being, we don't automatically say murderer. Think about the heroes of World War II, those who stopped Nazism. Would we say they're murderers? No. We say that they are heroes. Why? Well, the Parmenidean view says it's wrong to murder. The Heraclitean perspective says depends upon the situation, right? We look at all the designations we have for first degree, second degree, third degree murder. Is it premeditated? Is it a crime of passion, insanity, manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter? In the legal system, we have that tension that we have to deal with. Wrong to murder, But in this situation, what do we call it? So how do those affect my communication? Well, my challenge is to try to help you see both perspectives, and then to help you try to get to the point where you're applying those to your lives. I'm not here to tell you what to think, although I don't expect you to check your views at the door when you come to class, and I won't check mine. But my goal is not to make you think the way I think. My goal is not to indoctrinate you. My goal is not to tell you what to think, but to help you learn how to think critically, to look at things from various perspectives. Sometimes we call that problem solving, right? I call it the lighting of a fire, looking at things from different perspectives. What's my favorite thing about Virginia Tech? Well, this is going to sound cliche, but I mean, I love my department. I love the people I work with. We have great staff and we have faculty. But I got an email from a student just yesterday. She said, "I miss you." She's one of my student workers that I'll be working with again in the fall. And what she said she missed was that I was a faculty member who cared about students. And turns out she's in Blacksburg for the summer, and she wants to get together on Zoom just to get caught up. That's quite a compliment. But I enjoy working with young people. And being a graduate of Texas A&M University, whoop, Giga Maggies, Virginia Tech is a lot like A&M, so in many ways it's a home away from home here in Virginia. I love working with students. I love Hokies. How can I make an impression with my professor, online or in a large lecture class? Well, you got to go to class. Go to class prepared. Ask questions. Introduce yourself, right? And one of the things that I do early in the semester is when students will talk on the first or second day of class, and I do try to get you talking on the very first day. I mean, one of the reasons I go in and say, "Howdy," and wait for a response is because I want you to know that I want you to respond. I'm not there to have a monologue. I'm not Stephen Colbert, right? And I go in and have my opening monologue. I want dialogue, and so I will say "howdy" until I get a class of 300 to respond with "howdy," because I've got you responding. And then I ask for announcements and give students the opportunity to promote whatever's going on in their organization on campus, because I want you to talk. And then what I do on those first days of classes, when a student talks, I'll go back to my office, get on the computer, go to Hokie Spa and look at my roster, and there's your Hokie P, your picture, right? And I begin to put names and faces together, and I'm never ceases to amaze me that students are just flabbergasted when I go to class the next time, and I'll say, "Yeah, Tiffany, what do you think about that concept in the readings?" "What? How did he know my name?" "Because you spoke up in class, or because you introduced yourself." I don't ever want you to feel like you're just another number or a face in the crowd. You're a human being, and so that's why I try to get to know your name and get to know you. So don't worry so much about making an impression on a professor. Get to know the professor. Engage in class, and that will make an impression. Another question, what is one thing that sticks out about Virginia Tech's community that you do not see at any other university? That's a tough one, because I have enjoyed the different universities that I have worked at, but I have to say in my department, the Department of Communication, there is a lot of care and concern for students. You don't always get that at Research One institutions. Tenure track and tenure faculty have a lot of emphasis placed on their research and getting research done. And at some institutions, you can walk down the hall of a department and there are a lot of doors that are closed. People are working on their research, or they're at home working on their research, or they have office hours, and if office hours are 11 to 12 and you're not there at 11:59, they close the door. Now, we have lives too, and so there are things that we need to do. But think of the difference of walking through Shanks Hall and most of the doors are closed, or walking through Shanks Hall where English and Comm departments are located, and seeing doors open, seeing students in offices talking to faculty, seeing me, other faculty there when it's not our office hours, but the door's open and we're there if students want to come by. I think that is a very important aspect of our culture here that you won't always see at Research One institutions. Is it okay to come to office hours even if I don't have a specific question? Of course. I've even met students at, I guess I shouldn't say the names of these coffee establishments, but I've met them on campus and off campus for coffee, and we've talked about course content. We've talked about future plans. I've talked to students about to go to grad school or not to go to grad school. We've talked politics. We've talked religion. Of course, it's okay to go to a professor's office hours. Now, it's always courteous to ask the professor or to tell the professor, I don't really have any questions about class. Would this be a good time just to visit? Because there may be other students who we know are going to be coming by to look over an exam. They didn't do well on the exam and that sort of thing. But typically what we'll say is, yes, have a seat. Or can you come back in 15 minutes? Or can we get together on Tuesday and I'll meet you at fill in the blank and we'll get coffee and I'll buy. But yes, get to know your professors, because when it comes time for me to write a recommendation letter, that potential graduate school or that potential employer is going to want to know more than they came to class, they made a good grade. They'll see that on your transcript. I want to be able to tell them something about you, about your critical thinking, right? About your insights, about your thoughtfulness. And I don't necessarily get the opportunity to learn that if I only see you in a large lecture class. So get to know your faculty. We are here to help you. Would you say that professors attempt to tie in current events into the curriculum? I sure hope so whenever possible, right? I tell my students that theory is only as good as it is practical, and so we try to apply it to life. If I'm going to be talking about pre-Socratic philosophers who lived 2,500 years ago, I don't want that to be boring history. A lot of people say, ugh, I hate history. Well, what'd you do over the summer? Don't tell me what you did, because that's history. I think what people hate is boring history, right? So in thinking about talking about current events, what's going on right now is going to be history. What happened this morning somewhere in the world is history. And people years from now will be looking back at it. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. It matters now where we are, and it will matter to people, us, and after we're gone, people in the future. There's nothing more exciting than to be able to show students this idea from 2,500 years ago, this worldview, this perspective is still influencing the world in this way today. And one of the best ways to do that is to apply it to current events. Now, one word of caution. Welcome to the NFL. You're in college. And it may be that if you're applying something to current events, somebody says something that offends you. They may intend to or may not intend to. That's not the point. Anybody can respond by getting offended. The question is, can we respond by thinking and coming up with a critically thoughtful response, other than that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard? Because that's just intellectual laziness. Just saying that I'm offended and being offended doesn't make me right. I ought to be able to provide a response that is thoughtful but courteous on why I'm offended and why I disagree. And it's okay to say something with which someone else disagrees. That's okay. You don't want to go to college and have everybody think the same way, do you? Everybody dress alike, look alike, think alike, talk alike? No. So be prepared. As Protagoras said, no matter how thin you slice it, right? There's always two sides. For every perspective, there's going to be another perspective. Seek out those other perspectives. What is a syllabus week like? Well, often I think you'll have reading and homework. Reading and homework, a lot like high school. If there's a quiz, unless it's going to be a pop quiz, it will show up the quiz or the exam on the syllabus. But typically you have to adopt Tullys Rule. Read some every day, write some every day, work some every day, and you're plodding along, cutting that steak one bite at a time. Don't try to pick the whole thing up the night before the exam, right? Cramming is not learning, right? Typical week is just plodding along, working, reading, writing, learning. How do you get research opportunities within your discipline? That's a great question. One of the best things you can do is listen to your faculty member, because they may say things in class like this. This is a new area of research. Not a lot of research has yet been done on. My little antennae, my research antennae. What am I going to do? I'm going to go talk to the professor in the office hours, go talk to him after class and say, how do I find out what research has been done? And as you get to know faculty, they get to know you. If they're looking for a research assistant, or if they have a grant or funding of some sort, and they're looking for an undergraduate, they've already got you in their mind, and they may approach you and say, would you like to do research with me on this project? Another reason it's important, you get to know your faculty. So finally, I think this is going to be the last question we have time for. Going back to the lecture, how does fate fit into the permanent versus always changing narrative? Can people change the outcomes of certain situations, or is everything permanent and already decided? Well, that's a question that is not only an excellent one, but one that will probably have to wait until the fall. The question would be this thing called fate. Does it exist? What evidence do we have for it? And we would have to discuss that in much more detail. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to answer it, and there are other questions there that we didn't get to, but look up my email address and send me an email, and I will be glad to answer your questions now or once you're here on campus. So thanks for your time, and let's go, Hokies!
Thank you to Dr. Howell for taking time to both educate us and inspire us a little bit. So I hope you have a little bit of time tonight to think through what you've heard and learned and have some processing time. But also I want you to think about follow-up questions. So both on Wednesday and Friday of this week, we have Ask a Professor sessions, and you can interact with a panel of professors, one of them being Dr. Howell, where you can ask questions of those professors, get advice, try to learn a little bit more about the academic experience and how you can be successful at Virginia Tech. We are so excited you're joining us in the fall, and I am so excited for you that you're going to be in classes with professors like Dr. Howell, who both inspire, give us lifelong learning lessons, but also give us the foundations of content to prepare us for our disciplinary learning as well as our breadth of learning that we know you will get at Virginia Tech. So thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.